Hey, Grandma. Happy birthday. Um, Welcome to 2020. 95 years. It's been a long road, and your life has seen a whole lot of things that we kind of take for granted these days happen. And so I'm going to kind of run through a list of that with my cats. There's Hannibal and Logan. Murdoch's hiding. So, 1925, you had the Grand Ole Opry. In 1926, the National Bar Association. 1927, first transatlantic phone call. 1928, the first regularly scheduled TV programming hit the air. In 1929, Seeing Eye Dogs. 1930, there were Hostess Twinkies. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure some of the originals would still be good. 1931, the Star-Spangled Banner became our national anthem. 1932 was when we had our first Winter Olympics. In 1933 was the first drive-in theater. 1934, the National Archives were established. In 1935, something we take for granted but we don't probably want, are parking meters. 1936, the Hoover Dam. In 1937, one of my favorite foods, Spam. In 1938, they set up the FDA to protect us from bad food drugs. 1939, Batman and Superman began their journey to become cultural icons. In 1940, we got Bugs Bunny. In 1941, unfortunately, we got the day that will live in infamy, Pearl Harbor. In 1942, the Manhattan Project began and gave us our first nuclear chain reaction. 1943, the Pentagon, which has since entered our lexicon as both a place and an institution. In 1944, we had our first program-controlled computer. In 1945, the first atomic bombs were dropped in anger. The only bombs were dropped in anger. 1946, the first electronic computer was invented. In 1947, we got transistors. Both of those things are part of our everyday life now. I'm holding something that is both in my hand right now. In 1948, the United States recognized Israel. 1949, the Emmy Awards started. 1950, Peanuts. That's where we got Charlie Brown. In 1951, direct dial phone service coast to coast. Instead of calling an operator, you could call somebody directly. In 1952 was the hydrogen bomb, and the threat of nuclear war proliferation got to us forever. And in 1953, the Corvette. Just thinking about how far back that is and how long they've been with us is kind of mind-boggling. In 1954, we got the polio vaccine. And something that I take for granted is I don't have to worry about polio and nobody else will. In 1955, McDonald's. In 1956, interstate highways. In 1958, we got NASA. In 1959 and 1960, Alaska and Hawaii became states, and we got our 50-star flag. In 1961, intercontinental ballistic missiles. It was no longer bombers, but now missiles. In 1962, we put the first American in orbit with the Mercury project. In 1963, zip codes, something that I've been putting on envelopes for my entire life, came into existence. In 1964, synthesizers, the first synthesized music, the ancestors of the keyboards that we use in churches today. And kind of take for granted. In 1965, we got our first photographs of Mars. 1966, science fiction became mainstream with Star Trek. A lot of ideas came from there, things that would change our lives. In 1967, McDonald's gave us the Big Mac. I'm sure every American knows what a Big Mac is. In 1968, 60 Minutes became a part of television forever. In 1969, we put the first man on the moon. In 1970, the Environmental Protection Agency was put together. In 1971, Walt Disney World came into being. In 1972, The Price is Right premiered on television. It's still running today. In 1973 was the first cellular phone call. In 1974, the thing I take most for granted from that year is, well, I was born, and I've been taking myself for granted ever since, and maybe I should take myself a little bit less for granted sometimes. In 1975, the Wheel of Fortune, again, still on the air today, I think with the original host and hostess. 1976, Apple Computer was founded. In 1977, the first personal computers. In 1978, the first computer bulletin board system, the precursor for the internet. In 1979, Jupiter has rings. We saw that with Voyager 1. I had always assumed that it had because, well, by the time I knew enough to know about planets, Jupiter had rings, just like Saturn. In 1980, the U.S. founded the Department of Education. In 1981, we had the space shuttles. In 1982, somebody poisoned some Tylenol, and that's where we got those foil covers on all of our pill bottles that are so annoying. In 1983, something that I know that mothers ever since have loved is chicken nuggets. In 1984, we unfortunately got crack cocaine and the term crackheads. In 1985, we have WrestleMania. Every American has heard of WrestleMania, even if they haven't seen one. In 1986, we got the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Why there wasn't a place to honor musicians before that, I'm not entirely sure. In 1987, The Simpsons began their journey to become a perpetual American fixture with some shorts on The Tracy Ullman Show. In 1988, Microsoft Windows began to go mainstream with Windows 2.1. In 1989, we got the Global Positioning Satellite System that we use on our phones and our cars to get where we want to go without looking at a map or knowing where we're going. In 1990, they passed a ban for smoking on airplanes in the United States, something that we pretty much take for granted today. In 1992, Windows got its first commercially successful operating system with Windows 3.1, and really the precursor of what we have today. And it followed by 1993 with high-powered computing chips in the form of the Pentium chips. 1994, the World Wide Web was in its infancy, and now it connects us all, and that's how you're going to view this video. In 1995, computer animation took off with Toy Story, and is pretty much in every film since, some form of computer editing, it seems. In 1996, we got Fox News as an alternative voice in news. For good or for bad, it's become a fixture, something like CNN, that it's just there. In 1997, Google.com domain was registered, and in 1998, the Google Inc. was founded. In 1999, we established a permanent presence in space when the space shuttle docked with the International Space Station. In 2000, Microsoft continued its operating system dominance with Windows 2000. In 2001, we got something that is a perpetual part of our lives, but I'd rather it wouldn't, and that obviously is, 9/11 and the War on Terror. In 2002, we didn't know it then, but we could sort of assume that the New England Patriots were a force to be reckoned with when they won their first Super Bowl in the modern era. In 2003, $20 bills got those security strips and all the color updates. They just kind of forgot that our bills used to be boring, smaller, and green. Everything looked like a dollar bill. 2004, we put some rovers on Mars, one of which was operational until middle of 2018. In 2005, YouTube. 2006, Facebook. 2007, iPhones. Everything that we kind of take for granted as being part of our electronic infrastructure today and as part of many people's daily lives, many hours a day. In 2008, we got our first private space launch. In 2009, we stopped having analog TV broadcasts. Everything's digital. In 2010, we got Instagram tested. And in 2011, we stopped flying space shuttles. In 2012, we got our first self-driving cars licensed. In 2013, 3D printing became meaningful and real with some industrial applications. In 2014, there was the Flint water crisis, which seems like it was just yesterday, but if it's been here that long, it's kind of taken for granted. In 2015, Amazon surpassed Walmart to be the U.S. biggest retailer. In 2016, the Powerball jackpot's over $1 billion, and you kind of assume that jackpots are just going to be monsters now, and they really aren't, but we assume it. In 2017, we had another major milestone in private space launch, and SpaceX launched its first Falcon 9, the rockets they're reusing today. And this is kind of where, we stop taking things for granted. Maybe they haven't been around as long as they need to be. Maybe it's, the world isn't, producing anything as remarkable that's become a part of our daily lives. It's just too new. But in 2018, Chick-fil-A was open on a Sunday, specifically to help victims from a flood related to Hurricane Florence in North Carolina. In 2019, copyrighted works from 1923 entered the public domain. This is the first time since 1998 that something new became publicly accessible. And in 2020, a year where we kind of realized we can't take anything for granted. Definitely not taking you for granted. Happy birthday. I love you, and God bless.